Good morning. Welcome to GBSLEP series of online events, Resilience, Evolution, Recovery. My name is Eva Truhanovic. I'm a board member at GBSLEP, and I focus on small and medium enterprises. As in my day job, I run a digital healthcare company. Matthew.
My name is Matthew Rhodes. I'm also a board director at GBSLEP with a focus on innovation. I spent 14 years running a small energy business in the West Midlands. We're chairing today's session together on diversification and pivoting as we all try and navigate our way through really difficult times through the pandemic and the EU transition period. In this session, we're going to look at the benefits of businesses diversifying to create immediate benefits to survive sometimes and medium-term benefits as well. So we're going to explore what diversification actually means. We'll ask whether it always makes sense to diversify and how we actually do it in a digital age. And throughout this year, the pandemic, we've seen some inspiring stories of businesses pivoting their business models. We'll see some more as part of this session, making changes to the products they offer and the way they work as well, particularly going online, obviously. In some sectors, it's clearly been not an option really to do this, particularly in areas where the markets have disappeared altogether. Public health restrictions have really impacted businesses in hospitality and retail sectors, as we know. So there's really been no option but to diversify there. In other areas, businesses have taken the opportunity to change the way they do things, like manufacturing and PR. We saw some of those businesses coming to some of our grant schemes, which Eva's going to pick up on now.
One of the points of interest is our Step Forward campaign. It has been launched in June to directly support businesses, and it's an ongoing package of support. You should be able to view a link on your screen, which you should be able to click the stepforwardcampaign.co.uk, and there are also additional links on GBSLEP website. We focus on providing support to all businesses through the Growth Hub and the services it signposts to through Growth Hub delivery partners. The last 12 months have seen huge changes to the Growth Hub. We've added 20 new roles over the past 12 months, including a number of sector specialists, such as low carbon, food and drink, life sciences, and creative industries, to name just a few. We also now have 4 specific growth and resilience account managers supporting the region's small and medium enterprises with COVID-19 recovery and UK transition preparations. One of our COVID-specific interventions as part of our Step Forward campaign was to pivot a Prosper grant, which was devised by GBSLEP and delivered by our Growth Hub. It has already made a difference. And as you're about to see, it has helped businesses diversify and pivot to safeguard jobs and create new ones, and to safeguard resilience and to build upon that newly found resilience and pivoting. If we could proceed to the video, please.
To use the Pivot and Prosper grant to purchase a new machine, which will allow us to enter new markets away from exhibitions.
From the Greater Birmingham and Solihull Local Enterprise Partnership has been very helpful because it's allowed us to find some additional resources to move our project forward.
I've got opportunities on a new project called Pivot and Prosper. We contacted them and the help came forward straight away. A simple, straightforward approach, and from that we was able to achieve a grant and bought the machine.
Well, the Pivot and Prosper grant has given us some funding to develop a business opportunity that involves taking gas that is not used properly and being able to run trucks on it. So hopefully in 2021 and 22 There could be up to £10 million worth of projects, which would guarantee some jobs, create some new ones.
The actual process of filling in the Pivot and Prosper grant made us actually start looking more positively at the venue. We started to look at what we have got rather than what we've lost. So by getting the money to invest in weddings, we now feel we've got a new lease of life.
So as we've just seen, diversification comes in many forms, from processes to products, and across the full GBSLEP area. Please do explore the links on your screens to find out more about how the Step Forward campaign and the programme, and how the Growth Hub can help you in your business too. Here at GBSLEP, we use our partnership networks to access intelligence and expertise in relation to supply chains and market opportunities. These networks help guide interventions that support diversification into new markets, and we've got so much capability across this region. One of our delivery partners is Aston University's Advanced Services Group. Ian McKechnie is Director of Strategic Programmes. I'd like to hand over to him now for his thoughts on diversification and on a programme he runs for SMEs that receive funding from us. There may be a short pause when we hand over with a holding slide, but you'll hear from Ian very shortly.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ian McKechnie. I'm the Director of Strategic Programmes at the Advanced Services Group at Aston Business School. I was delighted to be invited today to talk about diversification and how businesses diversifying are facing challenging times, obviously due to COVID. And what does that mean in terms of perhaps product and service diversification? Before I do that, let me just explain a little bit about why I'm here. We're a centre of excellence within Aston Business School, working with global firms, helping them add services to support the products. So it's about adding value to what they do for the customers, and ultimately leads to what we would refer to as outcome-based contracts. So you're providing the product and the service for the customer to make them more successful. So what does that mean in terms of diversification? So what we see are manufacturing and technology firms operating in base services where they just provide the product. Some of them will merge up into intermediate services where they are focusing on the actual condition of the product, perhaps using sensor data. And most of the companies sit in this area here. And what we find is that some of them look to diversify, i.e., how do they get into new markets? How can they develop new products? Our argument is not necessarily about diversification, but why not extend what you do up into this advanced service area where you're focusing on the capability, but that is driven by your own expertise, your knowledge of the product, knowledge of the market, knowledge of the customer. So what we do with companies is that we start to talk to them, and this is what it tends to look like, because they think, well, look, we need to diversify because we need to grow, we need to improve our revenues, we don't particularly know where to start. And some of the points that I picked up on the brief were really quite moving in terms of, they wanted an example of diversification. Well, we've got that. One of the firms that we worked with moved from manufacturing to buying racehorses. You couldn't get more diverse if you tried. But I was also mindful that the brief stated about optimizing products and processes. But what about services? That is extending the value that you can offer to your customers without having to diversify into products or markets that you know very little about. And obviously COVID has had an impact. So as an example, how do you fix a machine that is in a state of disrepair or needs a service when COVID prevents you from going on site to support a customer? So you've got use of design. You can design capability around about servicing that product, perhaps in a similar situation, but by using sensors and more remote prognostics and diagnostics to help you get around these challenges. One of the successful companies that we're working with at the moment moved from just producing cleansing wipes to actually disinfecting the whole ward within a hospital. So they're not diversifying, but what they're doing is they're adding value and building on the existing knowledge. And again, in the brief, one of the questions was, if businesses enter new markets, how do they plan for success in a digital environment? Well, there are lots of things happening at the moment. One of them is the digitally enhanced advanced services program that's helping manufacturing firms, transport firms, financial services firms look at their businesses in a different way. And you'll find when that happens, we then see things like Internet of Things, predictive analytics, value networks, all coming into play to support you as a business, extending the value that you provide to your customer. And within the Greater Birmingham and Solihull LEP, you've already got your Pivot and Prosper programme. We've also got a fully subsidised programme that would help manufacturers and technology innovating firms to diversify, but at a much higher level in terms of that specialism. So let me give you some examples. Where we would tend to have the conversation with companies is around about this 4-quadrant business model for advanced services. So we would help, in the first position there, customers understand what the value proposition was that they were offering their customer. Then we would deal with the value creation and delivery. So how do you get your internal processes and systems to such a state that you can deliver that added value? And once you've got these in harmony, then you can look at the third point, which is about the value capture process. How do you get paid for adding that new value? And ultimately, what you end up with is a competitive advantage. So it's not diversification that I was invited to present about this morning, but it is about diversification. It is about taking your business up into a higher plateau to look at adding more value to be in a position to make your customer much more successful. Rather than looking out, it's about looking forward towards what you've already got. And what tends to happen is that you've got this area here where this competitive advantage is about moving and thinking about taking away customer pains. How can you do more and extend into the value chain that your customer has? To do that, you need to start looking at what your value proposition looks like. So what is the capability that you're actually offering your customer? Don't try and think about the product, and it's very hard and counterintuitive because that's what you do day in and day out. You think about the product. But try to think about your customer and the pain that they may have in either using the product or in dealing with you as a customer, or indeed the challenges that they face within their own market. How can you wrap that up in a way that you've got a product and a service wrapped in a capability that you can provide to your customer to make you different from your competitors? And that's where the real value sits. We've experience of companies when they're selling a product, making perhaps 3% margin on the product. When you start looking at it in this advanced service business model context, and you're wrapping the services in to support the product, you can end up with close to 30% margin on these services that you're providing alone. This is what we're interested in, and this is what we want to try and get you to think about today, rather than specifically just diversification. So some of the examples that we've got that will work with fantastic firms right on our doorstep, I've listed 4 of them there in a book of case studies that we produced about 2 years ago, the blue book, and the green book is the more recent version that we've now got available. But the first company there is AE Aerospace, and they were a make-to-print business, getting designs, agreeing to make a product or an asset or an artifact for a price. But now what they're doing is they're putting in a glass factory, and that consists of a manufacturing cell where their customers have got direct control over that cell to be able to manufacture and produce their own products. So it's about adding much more value to that customer relationship. The second one there we've got was a firm called Central Scanning, and they provide handheld scanning devices, but they not only rent these scanners out now to get much more use of the asset in the market, but they're doing a lot of work now with the post-processing of that data that comes from the handheld devices. So again, it's about using their knowledge and expertise to add another level of superiority to what the customer actually gets. The third example there is a food company called Cool Mill Systems, and they are working on a rice milling machine that is producing next generation rice milling for the Chinese rice milling market. Now they're making the machines in the UK, planting them into the Chinese villages and controlling them via cloud technologies. So very sophisticated technology, but allowing their product to get into a market where they're focusing on adding that value again. And it's also about adding that value. So it's no longer about diversification for them. It's about how far can they extend into their markets and the opportunities that exist. And the fourth example there, I'm delighted that we've also got Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology, I think joining straight after me this morning. And Lee's going to tell you about his examples and how he's supporting and providing cloud services to make the customers much more successful. So again, we've got 30 examples of firms right on our doorstep that rather than looking at diversification in terms of different markets or products, what they've said is actually, let's look at our customers, let's see what we can offer, and let's do something different with them that adds much more value. And my biggest challenge, if I'm honest, day to day, is to stop managing directors and boards thinking purely about product and much more about thinking about their customers. And it can pay significant dividends when you do that, just by turning through that 180 degree to think, well, actually, what is the capability that my customer is looking for? And to help with that, we have actually created this Advanced Services Transformation Roadmap. So again, driven by the research coming from the Advanced Services Group within the business school, we have a tried and tested roadmap that helps firms navigate from the left-hand side all the way through to the right-hand side to help them provide these much more complex and advanced services to the benefit of them and their customer. And for firms that are lucky enough to be SMEs within either the Birmingham and Solihull or the Black Country LEPs, we have a fully subsidised programme available for companies right through until December 2021. So we can make the details available should you be interested, but we've already taken 300 companies through this programme and generated in excess of 38 million in new revenues. So I think the final message for me today is really, when you start to think about diversification, perhaps think first about diversifying within your own organisation and thinking much more about what the customer needs, rather than just trying to put new products and new markets in front of the organisation. So that's for me. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology. So what I'm going to do is cover what we've done around diversification, working with Aston University and their Advanced Services Group. So I think what we need to do is start at the beginning. So in the beginning, we were predominantly delivering infrastructure for SMEs and for enterprise organizations, and it was predominantly providing a physical piece of infrastructure such as a storage system, a compute platform, or networking infrastructure for those type of organizations. What we'd also do is the design and implementation of that so that we got it exactly what the customer wanted before we implemented it. We also provided reactive break fix services. So if the customer had a problem with a piece of infrastructure or some software or licensing issues or even use of the system, we would actually help them, but it was a reactive model. So if the problem arose, they would contact us and then we would deal with the situation at that point in time. It was also predominantly delivered on the customer's premises, whether that's a data center they had or a data room on the customer's site, or if they're using some kind of data center that they were renting space for and we were putting the equipment into there. So they were the key areas that we would do it. So one thing that you should have seen from the presentation from Ian was around looking at customer focus, and we've been working with Aston University for about 3 years now, and the Advanced Services Group. And one of the key things is to really speak to your customer and also prospective customers to really understand it from their perspective, because sometimes you can actually make assumptions about what your customers really want, but really speaking to them is the only way to actually find that out. So what we did was actually get a really good understanding of what the need was from the customer. So we spoke to a variety of organisations, large and small, and really got to get a picture of where they were at that point in time and tried to understand better what their needs were. The other thing was looking for gaps, because it may be that we've got a specific set of capabilities that we're offering the customer. The customer's got a specific set of things they can achieve themselves, but there might be some gaps in that need to be filled. Also, with this new world we're living in today, we've got this work from home has become a normality for a lot of organisations. So that's changing the way a lot of organisations work, and it also changes how their users interact with systems. So that's a real big effect on what we're delivering in this IT space for organisations. The other thing we need to look at is the operations side of things too. Initially we would put infrastructure in place and we'd hand it over to the company's operations people for them to manage and maintain it and continue to operate it, and then come to us if there was an issue, so we could do that reactive break fix type activity. But what we found with them is that operations side is becoming a bit more of a challenge for those organizations, especially as the type of infrastructure gets more complex, and also the technology that's used. We get situations where skills aren't really that viable. Another area that we find in a lot of organizations are really focusing on is the compliance. So if they're, say, an organization that sells goods over the internet or even over the phone, but then need to access customers, either bank records or using credit cards for payment, PCI compliance has become really important for them, and they need to ensure that all of their infrastructure and services are compliant. And this is same for organizations that keep patient records or many other things. So that compliance piece has become really important for a lot of organizations, and we found that in the conversations we've had with a number of our customers and potential customers. Another thing is security risk, because a lot of organizations are being attacked these days. Some of the figures are horrendous. We know of a case this morning where an organization has had all their files locked up by a ransomware attack, and they don't really want to pay the money, but it's finding a way to recover from that. And also these hackers are becoming very sophisticated in the way they do it. So security has become a really important thing. But also looking at risk, and a lot of people look at risk within a business from a business context, but not always from their IT perspective. And I think risk is becoming quite important, but not only the risk they've got, but also prioritizing those risks. So, a risk for a piece of infrastructure that's in an operational environment is different to a piece of infrastructure or software that's in a test and development environment. So understanding that risk level is becoming quite important to a lot of organizations. And also, finally, a lot of people are looking at cloud native for their infrastructure they're deploying. So it's using public cloud services and the container way of deploying things. But they're struggling with skills. Finding people to actually employ who understand these environments and can deploy them effectively is becoming a real challenge for them, both financially, but also just finding the people in the first place. And what we've seen with a lot of organizations, their own staff are becoming very generalists. They're not specialized in any particular area. So they find it a struggle when they find something new like this coming along. So utilizing things like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft's Azure platform, and also delivering similar type services on their own infrastructure in data centers or data rooms on their premise. So from our perspective, we needed to diversify, and we looked at what we needed to do and why we needed to do it. So one thing was having that understanding of the customer and a bit more focus on what the customer need was. So what we then looked at is, first of all, delivering managed services. So especially for small and medium enterprises, a lot of them don't have the staff to be able to do everything themselves. So having the ability to effectively pay for a service that's delivered as a managed service, and you get all the infrastructure and the operations and security a part of that, including things like data protection and things, is quite a key thing for small and medium enterprises. We actually did that for a number of our customers early on towards the end of last year, and it's actually paid bonuses for us and the customers when we moved into March of this year, when a lot of organisations need to work from home. It was quite easy for us to do that because we'd centralise all our infrastructure within our data centre, and we can give them access to it quite easily from home PCs or laptops they could take home. We also looked at how we could deliver operations as a service. And the key thing about operations is, one is understanding what's there, and we call that discovery. So understanding exactly what's there in the environment. And a lot of organizations don't know what's actually in their own environment. We also then need to be able to monitor that. And the complexity comes from now this environment split across many sites. It could be many of your own physical sites. It could also be a number of public cloud and private cloud providers as well. So being able to monitor all of that and understand exactly what's going on is quite a critical thing. So we've developed an operational service so we can actually deploy a solution that will help them understand exactly what they've got, but also understand how it's functioning and how it's being operated, and also do some of the operational things. One of the key things we're seeing in the operations space nowadays is automation. And automation gives two values to the organization. One of them is to be able to respond quickly to a problem, but secondly, to provide consistency and response as well. So if people are involved, sometimes you get inconsistent responses to things. So allowing it to be automated makes sure that we get that more consistent response. Also, with these organizations struggling with deploying these cloud native services, what we've done is look at building out an infrastructure or platform as a service piece for those cloud native services to make it easier for them to focus on the actual development of their applications and securing those and then deploying them, rather than having to think about all the nuts and bolts that's required to put it together. And we see that as quite critical for a lot of organizations that have this skills issue that I mentioned before, because if you don't have those internal skills, you're not going to be able to design and deploy a cloud native environment and be able to operate it. So having that platform delivered to you as a service will make life a lot easier. And we see a lot of organizations, especially through this digital transformation piece, a lot of people are looking to achieve, will need to move to these newer type platforms. We also see compliance from the conversations with our customers as being a key thing, and looking to deliver a compliance as a service platform. So this is looking at achieving PCI and equivalent of HIPAA, and also in this cloud native environment, there are other standards like CIS and NIST, which give people a very secure environment that they can believe is going to be safe to run their applications within, or at least give them a foundation of security that they can start from as they go forward. And we see delivering it as a service for compliance helps the organization, rather than having to do everything manually, where they go off and recruit consultants to come in and analyze their infrastructure and go through the process of writing reports and advising them changes, and then stepping away until the next audit happens, and effectively they could dip off from where they were with their compliance. Having it as a service, we can actually deliver compliance throughout the period of operation. And also cloud native security as a service, and this is becoming a real issue. I've been involved with computing for around about 40 years, and it's moved quite quickly in that time and changed quite considerably, because 40 years ago you may have 2 or 3 large computing platforms, and then gradually moved into a situation where you might have 10 to 100 platforms, and then a thing called virtualization came along, which increased it by another factor of 10. But when people are moving to this new world of cloud native applications and what we call microservices, again, that increases by a factor of 10. So you're looking at thousands of things to monitor and ensure are secure. So again, we believe that cloud native security model, delivering it as a service, makes life easy for the organization to be able to just focus on what they're doing, delivering the services that they need. And that's me finished with my hopefully 10 minutes. Hopefully I didn't overrun. We were rushing at things a little bit at the beginning, but if you've got any questions, I believe you can put it in the chat and we can chat and we can pick those up.
Thank you, Ian and Lee, for your insights and for sharing your experiences of being part of the program, Lee. We are now going to go off into the breakout sessions. When you registered, you will have signed up for one of our sector-based sessions: business, financial and professional services, creative industries, food and drink manufacturing, low carbon technologies and health technologies. We will regroup in 25 minutes. And if you could come back with 1 to 2 minute summary of your discussions and headline messaging, that would be great to share. Thank you. We'll move on to holding slide now.
Well, hello everybody and welcome back. We hope you all had stimulating discussions in your breakout groups. What we're going to do in a second is I'm going to be joined by the facilitators of the 5 breakout groups here on screen, and we'll just ask each one to go through maybe a couple of points from their group that they want to feed back to the main group. But before we do that, and while we're waiting for the other 4 to join us, we had a question in the chat bar in the earlier session from Sheila McKiernan, who's a trustee of a mental health charity in the region, and she wanted to know what advice we have for diversification and survival in the charity sector particularly. And Eva has volunteered to answer that question for you.
As much as it is possible, Sheila, and I hope you'll find the answer helpful. The immediate answer that springs to mind is that the charity sector has been impacted most gravely with the lockdown conditions, with the inability to hold fundraising events and to fundraise in the usual ways that you would have been able to before the lockdown rules came into force. They are going to stay in force for quite some time. So the question is now survival for the charitable sector and also finding new ways of thriving in the new normal. And one idea that sprang to mind was digital marketing. But as we've had a discussion with Lee, traditional approach to digital marketing may not be as effective as it had been in the past. So one of the ideas was to use social media and video links via LinkedIn. And that seems to have worked much better than emails and web campaigns and telephone campaigns as used previously. So perhaps diversification for the charitable sector means new ways of looking at how do you achieve the same goals, but perhaps with new technologies. And digitization is one of the issues that a lot of companies came to the Growth Hub asking for assistance with. So if a charitable organization is struggling, again, reaching out to sources of support may be the best way forward in looking at how you can do things that you used to do, but perhaps differently with the aid of technology.
Thank you very much, Eva. That's really helpful. I was just going to add to that because I couldn't really resist it. The arts sector is not the same as the charity sector. I'm involved with an arts charity in Birmingham called Craftspace, and they've just won a prize for how they've responded to the pandemic. So exactly as Eva said, embracing digital techniques to continue to engage with audiences. And if you're interested in ideas for how charitable arts organisations, in brackets in particular, have addressed the challenges of the last year, if you go to an organisation called the Akatis Philanthropy Foundation, they've got 8 or 9 case studies on their website of how charitable theatres, arts groups and so on have responded effectively to the pandemic, and that might help some of you. Okay, so with that, then we'll go on now to get feedback from the 5 breakout groups, sector by sector. I'm hoping to be joined on stage here with by someone from each of the sectors. At the moment, I've got Ellen from Food and Drink, and Serena was here. Is Serena still there? No, she's gone. So we're having a few difficulties, but you know, in the interest of time, I'm going to start with Ellen and give her the opportunity to feedback to us on the Food and Drink Technologies or Manufacturing Group, please.
Yeah, so had some interesting questions about what businesses we've got in the region, so I was happy to explore that, and also looking at how we sort of better link up suppliers with other companies as well.
Okay, those are both things the LEP can do better, is it? Yeah, okay, that's great. That's helpful. I've got Catherine and Serena I can see now as well from the health and the low carbon technologies groups. So Catherine, if we could start.
The presentation yesterday as well. Some of the businesses were really supportive of the journey of Foresso, and the idea of showcasing the sort of initiatives that we implemented is very beneficial to help other businesses decarbonize. So there was a lot of focus on the support of the Growth Hub, for example, to help them identify or navigate a little bit the kind of wealth of support and opportunities are available. Which is key, that sort of one-on-one support and help with the identification of opportunities. There was a mention to the zero carbon the business pledge that the West Midlands Combined Authority is putting together, trying to understand if that's sort of initiatives that can encourage businesses to decarbonize or understand more about the topic, and also focus a lot on the value of the supply chain, particularly in the transition to in the decarbonization transition to a low carbon future. So is how we can focus on supporting the supply chain to decarbonize, and then define what is the value, the value on the sustainability.
That's great. Thanks very much. Sounds like you had a really lively discussion there, Serena.
For the very short time, yes.
Yeah, you did flag actually, and for anyone who's in this session who wasn't around yesterday, there was a whole session actually on the green recovery, which covered low carbon technologies as well. And the platform that we're all watching this on gives you the facility to go back and watch recordings of previous sessions, which I was going to say a bit later, but that's a good link from Serena there to remind people you can do that if you're interested in it a bit more about that. Okay, and then we've got David, I think, from the creative industries sector.
Hi all. Yes, sure. So our session was on creative industries futures. Where's it going? There were 4 fundamental principles we discussed. One is that we'll have more cloud-based sort of multi-platform high-speed networks, and that'll obviously change what's being done. One of the key changes is having layered experiences. So they feel that instead of us having a separate games industry film, that things will merge together, and so we'll have kind of platforms that cover them all at the same time. So we can have a sort of have a live event experience and a games thing at the same time, and that means there'll be new clusters. So there'll be new sort of multi-platform clusters. So there's a real huge shift, and we were talking. We had Deloitte's in there and Bob Consulting, who are both kind of futures experts. And obviously there's a move towards kind of, you know, snackable subs, as we all know, for sort of streaming services and so on. And the idea, which was interesting, that there'll be, we're asking, well, what will people buy? And they think there'll be a sort of $1,000 per month high end for sort of that 1% who want everything. Apple or others will offer it. So there'll be even more diversity. And much more high cost things. And the final point was that because of COVID, actually some businesses have got more cash than they had before, and there's more flexibility to rearrange their businesses. So for us, it was very much the sector always changes, but now a real chance. COVID has been good for many games industries, really good for them. So hasn't been good for others, obviously, but essentially a real opportunity to change staff, change skills, move ahead in this new sort of multi-platform way. So there was a lot of things. And also we're going to fund some specialist workshops and some of the discussion helped think about how they would be framed. So useful in a very short space of time.
Okay, thank you very much, David. That's great, and a really positive way. I think probably to end, because I seem to be missing Hilary from the Business and Professional Services Group. So unless she speaks now, I'm going to carry on. Yeah, no, I just picking up on what David said there, and Serena before David as well, and everyone else. I think there's a number of themes that have come out of this morning's sessions around diversification. David really kind of gave a positive and upbeat interpretation of that there. I think in terms of the opportunities and the breadth, I think online and digital is quite a big theme that's come through, particularly this last session. And Serena mentioned the Growth Hub as a source of advice and pointing people in all these different directions, which when you come to Diversify, it takes you into new areas. So the resources there, and all these sector groups we've set up in the LEP as well, all places you can come and get more information. So thank you to everyone who's contributed this morning. We've really run out of time, and apologies for running over. We had a few technical issues, but I think that's partly a function of the fact that we've got a fantastic platform which this event's running on, which you can continue to explore. So you can see recordings. If you missed anything, you can go and look at some of the other sessions. There was some good speeches yesterday from Katie and Tim Pyle, the Chief Executive and Chair of the LEP. You can continue your conversations now if you want to carry on, maybe talking across the sector groups and so on in the networking lounge. And I don't quite know how to do that, but I'm sure there's a button on the screen somewhere. And there are sessions for the rest of the week on our town centres, reimagining our town centres, leadership critical through a crisis, skills and innovation. So please do look at those, and we hope to see some of you there as well. And we'll also be communicating, I think, with everybody with links and videos, everyone who's attended. So once again, thank you very much for attending this morning and taking the time out, and I hope you all have a very good afternoon. Thank you.